Welcome back to Sewing for a Friend. Today we are picking up with the dress for Elena. So if you watched the previous video, then you know that I am making this dress, 7349 McCall's pattern, for my friend Elena. And I left things on a bit of a cliffhanger in that I wasn't sure whether to use the test knit that I was planning before I actually used the knit on her dress, so I want to do a mock-up first. And I got some feedback from both Elena and some other folks, and thank you very much. And I decided that I'm just not comfortable jumping right in with the original fabric or the actual dress fabric. So I am going to use the red stretchy fabric to test this out, even though the fabric that I'm using for the test is stretchier than what they recommend for this actual pattern. Okay, so I think I'm just gonna go and cut out the fabric now. Okay, so I have traced out my pattern pieces and I've laid out the fabric, and I don't have enough of the test fabric to do the full dress. But like I mentioned in the previous video, what I'm going to do is just make it as long as I can, because this is basically just a test run anyway, and as long as it fits shoulder to hip, the around the knees should be no problem because of the flare. I do have this in 2 separate cuts or 3 separate cuts. So I have the longer piece that I have, and then I have 2 smaller cut pieces that were scraps from another project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the pieces that are the longest pieces, which are the center back and the center front, and I'm going to put them on the long piece, and then I'm going to use the inside panel, or the side panel for the front and the side panel for the back. I'm going to do this out of the shorter bit, and then hopefully I will have enough to cut the sleeve out with. And yeah, so that's what I'm going to do next. I am not feeling particularly camera ready today for some reason, so once I get this pinned, then I'll decide whether or not I actually want to cut or show myself cutting the fabric. So time will pass. These are Ginger scissors, and they are something that reminds me of my childhood. And growing up, my mom had a pair of Ginger scissors, and I remember how heavy they felt, and it just felt different and better than some of the lighter weights alternatives to them. There's just something about having that heaviness that makes them feel really good in the hand. My first job was working for a fabric store way back when I was like 16, and I remember one of the things that I bought for my mom as a gift was a new pair of Gingers, and so that's a happy memory. Love you, Mom. I usually have a bowl that I toss the scraps in when they're small scraps, but I see now that both of my normal scrap bowls are holding other things, so I'm just going to toss it there for now. So as I'm cutting this out, I just realized that although I told you about the really cool pattern notcher little gadget in the last video, that I did not go back and actually notch these pattern pieces. So this first one doesn't have the notch in the pattern itself. So I will go ahead and use my scissors, slide it under the pattern piece and snip it, and then I will show you, or will snip the rest of the pattern pieces, or notch them, I should say. So, things there. So what we have here is the two little notches there, and I will slide this in here just like you would a hole punch, and I will punch those out. And I just realized when I did that although I snipped some of the notches, I did not do all of them. So there's one that I forgot, so I'm going to try to line this back up with the notches that I already cut. And then I will go back in here. And cut this one. Okay, I think that's all I'm going to show for this video as far as the cutting out of the fabric. For this, I will go ahead and stop the recording now. I will go ahead and record myself cutting out the rest of the fabric as a separate video in case people like the sound of it and they want to basically have a little ASMR with it. That's something that a very kind viewer made a comment about in my previous video when I was actually tracing out the pattern, that they liked the sounds that were made when I was smoothing the fabric and laying the pattern weights and tracing the actual pattern. So I'm going to start posting those as well. I don't do well with managing multiple social media accounts, and so I'm just going to put all of those videos on here, but I'll label them, and if you're not into that sort of thing, you can just not watch that video. Okay, thanks, and additional time will pass. Okay, so I had intended to create a video that was basically just going to be an ASMR-ish type video where I just taped myself while I was cutting out the fabric for the test run. Just finished that. I don't know how much time has passed. I'm time blind, and I didn't make note before I started. But what I can tell you is it feels like it's been a while since, that it took me a while to do that. I don't know, half an hour, maybe more. I don't know. Like I said, time blind. But when I came back over to stop the video, which didn't have anything on, like no voiceover on it at all. It was just the ambient sounds of me cutting out the pattern, or cutting out the fabric, although my washing machine and the garbage man could probably have been heard on it. I realized that when I hit the button to record, I didn't hit record, I just took a photo. So, won't be posting that ASMR today, or tomorrow, or whenever, because, yeah, it's just a photo. But that does mean at least that the fabric is cut out, and my next thing is going to be pinning it together and then trying to start sewing it up. So let's move on. I think I mentioned this in a previous video, that I am a novice sewist. that I sewed some when I was in high school, just a little bit. I made 2 or 3 outfits, I think, maybe. And then I got tired of it and moved on to something else. I don't remember whether the piano lessons or the voice lessons or the sewing lessons came first, but none of the 3 lasted very long. But one of the things that I find frustrating, and I think this is common with a lot of other people who are neurodivergent or neurospicy, which is easier to say, that we struggle with commercial patterns and reading the instructions and trying to figure things out. It seems to me like the easy stuff, they take a lot of time to explain, and then the stuff that I think is hard, they like put it all in one step. And it's hard for me to decipher the diagrams and what step was what because they combine things. But I am looking at the instructions for McCall 7349, and as I'm looking at it, it does look fairly straightforward. I'm looking over the instructions. The only thing I'm a little concerned about is doing the neck or the neck binding, because I haven't done that often, if at all, and so that is the big concern for this one. But it looks like the other stuff is going to be fairly straightforward, which I appreciate, and they did a very good job with the instructions. At least up into the sleeve. I haven't really looked at the sleeve much. I've just been looking at the panels back and forth. And when I started or restarted sewing, I realized that there were a lot of sewing words or jargon that I wasn't familiar with. And so I Googled a lot as far as, you know, what's a stay stitch? What's an edge stitch? What does it mean to layer a seam? And thankfully there are lots of helpful videos out there on YouTube and TikTok on how to do those things. And so that is how I have learned. One of the things that I think is essential for sewing on knits for me is the walking foot. So it is trying to make it increases your chances of the fabric, the top layer of fabric and the bottom layer of fabric, advancing at the same rate through the machine and being stitched. And being stitched without ending up with either the top layer or the bottom layer being longer at the end. So it kind of helps to keep things from shifting. And also I find it to be really helpful when I'm trying to make a curved seam. A lot of people out there do their sewing without fancy feet on their sewing machines, and bless them, I am happy for them, yay go you. But I need a little more help when it comes to the actually sewing things on the machine, and I find the walking foot is very helpful for me. Okay, I think that's it. I have looked over the instructions, and now I am going to do some stay stitching before I pin things together. I'll be back. So I have stay stitched the front between the shoulder and the waistline on both sides of the front panel. And the next thing I will need to do is pin the next set of panels together that it calls for are the back panel, or the back panel, and then to put the sides on it. And so, yeah, that will be the next step. I may or may not show the rest of the steps. I may just decide I want to spend the time getting it finished and want to see what the finished product look like. So may do that. We'll see. I remember now why this fabric was still in my stash and I hadn't made anything with it yet. While it feels soft and wonderful to the touch, it is a real pain to stitch. Correction, pinning on this fabric is actually worse than trying to sew it. The pins, I mean, it's wrinkly, and so when I try to put one pin in, it wrinkles the fabric underneath, or it's not nice and smooth underneath there. And I think the clips would actually work better for holding things into place, but because the fabric is so fiddly and flimsy, they're a little heavy, and so they pull on it. Once I'm finished with this, if I have any more of this fabric in my stash, no matter what color, no matter how much, I'm either pitching it or donating it. Yay! I have persevered. I have pushed through despite the awful fiddly fabric, and I have most of a dress done. Because it has the raglan sleeves, of course I can't hang it up on Valentina to model it for you just yet, but this is the mock-up so far. You can see that it's not perfect. You can see here where there's puckering in the wrong place here on this side boob there. This seam, not too bad. If I flip it over, so that was the front, we will flip it over to the back. And I also had a little bit of an issue with the fabric again when it was sliding around, and you can see the stay stitching that I did not quite get enclosed into the seam there. But overall, I am much happier with it than I thought I would be about 20 minutes ago, or maybe even a half an hour ago. Again, time passed. Still the same day though. Yeah, so I did not follow all of the instructions for this, for sewing this mock-up up, because it asked for me to use a double seam on the, all the seams on the insides, and I had my walking foot on, and putting the double needle on there is a big hassle, and this was just primarily to make sure that the pattern size was correct and that fit Elena well enough to use. So I am going to celebrate and take a break, and probably tomorrow come back and try to put the sleeves in. And if I'm feeling particularly energetic, I might actually put the collar in. My initial thought when I decided I was going to mock this up first was I thought I might do a good enough job that, or I might make sure I did a good enough job on it that Elena could wear it as a bonus t-shirt or something. But because the knit is such, it's such a trying thing for me to work with this particular fabric, I basically just want to I just decided I wanted it fit for purpose. It's just a mock-up. She's not going to wear it anywhere. So it was okay if things weren't quite perfect. I could make it perfect, or as best I could, when I make it with the actual knit fabric, which is a lot less stretchy and fiddly than this one. About halfway through, I contemplated just pitching it completely and saying, forget it, I will move on to something else. But then I remembered one of my favorite Disney songs. I am not a fan of Disney really, but I do quite enjoy the song, What Else Can I Do, from, I forget the name of it now. It's the one about Bruno. But anyway, so the song's not about Bruno. Bruno has his own song, but it's the one, basically, it's what else could I do if it didn't have to be perfect, it just had to be. And so that is sort of my anthem that I'm trying to adopt. It doesn't have to be perfect. It can still be perfectly functional and acceptable. Doesn't have to be perfect. So anyway, okay, so taking a break, time will pass, probably more than just a few hours between now and the time I get back to do the sleeves, but yeah, that's it for now, folks. So I sat down to sew the sleeves into the dress, but before I sew the sleeves into the dress, I have to sew them closed. So this is something that happens to me on a regular basis. My machine ate the fabric. And so because this is a walking foot and not just the regular foot, I am going to have to take this whole thing off in order to properly remove this fabric which has been eaten. Yeah. Good times. I managed to get both sleeves in. Now I'm stay stitching the neck. But unfortunately, my sewing machine is eating the fabric again, which means I will need to take it apart again. It's finished. Yay! Now, is it finished well? No. But it does look pretty good from this angle. Now we will sneak up on the dress and look at some of the more detailed bits. So the raglan sleeves, as far as putting the sleeve part in here, was fairly easy once I figured out exactly how it needed to be pinned to make that work. And you can see the side seam here on this boob's not too bad. But when you get closer, you can see I had some trouble with the collar, which I had anticipated. You can see that you can see the understitching in some places, as well as the edge stitching that they had me do. I try not to use the same color of thread as the fabric when I'm doing a mock-up, because if I need to take something apart, I want it to be fairly easy for me to see the thread to be able to do that. You can tell though that there's puckering here where again, this fabric got caught there. So this side is a little lopsided. Then the neck, putting in the collar, I fussed with it for a long time, trying to figure out exactly how to pin it. I still think that perhaps there was something wrong with the instructions, but and here you can see that the fabric, as I was trying to feed it through the collar, well, the collar didn't seem to be as big as the hole in the neck. And so I started at the back, and as I worked my way back around, I ended up with some overlap here that didn't get taken in as I worked around the neck. I may have missed some instructions. Maybe they told me that I needed to ease stitch it, or to kind of not really gather it, but to stitch it around and then pull it along the thread to kind of make it fit. But I didn't do that, and you can see here the result of that. However, I think that it's probably still fit for purpose in that when Elena tries it on, she'll be able to see if this is actually going to work for her as far as the size goes. You can see the back here, as I mentioned, I had some issues there with the top, or the understitching showing, or the stay stitching. But all in all, it's a finished garment in that it is complete. No, it's not perfect, but as I mentioned, the purpose of this was basically just to practice using this pattern, because I'd never used it before, and also to get an idea of if this size was going to work. So I think that now the next thing is for me to actually send this to Elena or drop it off and let her try it on and see how well it fits. And then I am fairly confident that when I try to do this in the other fabric, that I will be able to deal with some of these other issues that were, I think, more a function of this particular fabric and it just not being good for this pattern. And they did warn me. They did warn me because they said, you know, moderate stretch knit, and this is super stretchy. So anyway, there it is. And I think in the meantime, while I am waiting to get this to Elena and for her to try it on and give feedback to me on it, I will probably move on to another project and probably make it for another friend of mine and make something that doesn't need fitted. So maybe an apron or a bag for my little friend Beverly. Okay, thanks. Bye.